Hi, you're on the Reddit Confessions channel, where secrets unravel, silence screams, and the truth always finds a way out. Let's begin. The moment I saw the red plastic cup in our trash can, I knew she lied. Not because we don't drink, we do. Not because we don't have people over, we don't. But because that exact brand of cup had shown up once before, months ago, when she swore she was just dropping by a friend's art show. A friend who, I later discovered, was her ex. She hadn't noticed I came home early. I had a headache from work and forgot to text her I was leaving at lunch. When I walked in, the house was quiet, cleaner than usual, almost reset, like someone hit a refresh button. The air still held a trace of her perfume, and the trash lid wasn't fully closed. Inside it, a crumpled napkin with B drawn in black ink and two red cups. One stained with lipstick, her shade. One not. I didn't say anything that day. Or the next. I acted normal. And I watched. A week later, she told me about an invite. Her ex Bryce was throwing a party. A launch thing for his new media company. She said she had to go. Everyone would be there. I'll only stay an hour, she added, already knowing I wouldn't be okay with it. I reminded her of everything. Of how she promised to cut ties with him after the playlist incident. Of how he messaged her accidentally at 2 a.m. last year. Of how their so-called friendship looked more like a shadow she refused to walk out of. She bit her lip, tilted her head. It's just a party, Landon. Just a party. So I did what every man taught to stay calm does. I swallowed it. I told her fine. I didn't yell. I didn't fight. But something in me cracked. That night, I didn't wait for her to leave. I handed her the car keys, said, "Be safe," and went for a long walk. I needed to feel the cold on my face. I needed to stop picturing them laughing together in a crowd, wine glasses clinking. I needed to not imagine him looking at her the way I used to, like she was the only color in a gray room. I ignored her that entire week after. I didn't ask questions. Didn't engage. I thought maybe, just maybe, if I pulled away, she'd come toward me again. But I didn't know that silence, in our case, wasn't a bridge. It was a cliff. And 7 days later, I saw something. Something that didn't just confirm my fears. It destroyed everything I believed about our marriage. The days that followed were a quiet war zone. We weren't shouting, we weren't fighting, but the silence between us could have sliced steel. I didn't ask her how the party went. She didn't offer. She just floated through the house like she was made of glass, avoiding questions that were never asked. I smiled when I had to, responded when necessary, and watched her closely while pretending not to care. But I cared. Too much. That was the problem. I started noticing small things. Tiny details that would have seemed harmless on their own but, stitched together, looked like a pattern. She started taking her phone into the bathroom. That had never been a thing. She turned off notifications, kept it face down. She smiled more often at her screen than she did at me. She claimed she was just catching up on design briefs. But Jolene's expression when working was usually stressed, not dreamy. I told myself to stay calm, to collect facts, not emotions. So I did what any heartbroken coward would do. I waited, and I watched. One evening, I went to get water after she'd fallen asleep on the couch. Her phone was on the coffee table, unlocked, probably from a missed call she didn't hear. I shouldn't have looked, but I did. There wasn't much. No nudes, no obvious cheating texts. But then I saw the pinned conversation, Bryce. What struck me wasn't the content, but the frequency. They messaged daily, multiple times. Always brief, never scandalous, but far too familiar. It was the tone that gutted me. Inside jokes, fragments of memories, shared memes, and a nickname I hadn't heard in years. He called her Jolie, and she liked it. One message, however, didn't belong there. It wasn't a reply to anything. Just a lone line sent the night after the party. Wish you didn't have to sneak out. Next time, stay. I read it 3 times, hoping my eyes had betrayed me. But the words didn't change. The timestamp matched the night she came home at 3 a.m. Humming, shoes in hand. I remember because I'd been sitting in the dark, pretending to be asleep as she crept past. I didn't sleep that night either. I just stared at the ceiling, heart pounding, mind spinning scenarios I couldn't prove. The next morning, I said nothing. I made her coffee. I smiled. I told her I'd be working late. I wasn't. I just needed time to think. Because here's the thing, I didn't want to explode. I didn't want to accuse her without giving her a chance to confess. I wanted her to say it first, to own it, to feel something. But Jolene wasn't the type to admit anything unless cornered. So I made a plan, and it started with replying to Bryce from her phone. Just one word, okay. Let the next move come from him. Let the truth dig its own grave. It was terrifying how easy it was to step into her skin. I stared at the message from Bryce, that infuriating little tease. Wish you didn't have to sneak out. Next time, stay. The gall of him. The way he spoke so casually, like this was something they did. Like this had happened before, and I just hadn't noticed. I hovered over the keyboard, unsure. Then I typed a single word, simple and open-ended. Okay. Not a heart, not a smiley. Just okay. And hit send. I locked the screen and placed her phone exactly where it had been before, face down on the table. My hands were shaking. My chest felt like it was full of stones. I didn't know what I was doing. Not really. I just knew I needed confirmation. I needed to know whether I was still living with my wife or with a stranger who wore her skin. The reply came less than 2 minutes later. Same place, same time? My jaw clenched. Same place. Same time. So this wasn't the first time. She'd been lying to my face with a calmness I couldn't even fathom. I copied the number and sent it to myself, then deleted the entire message thread from her phone. Every word, every emoji, every damn trace of the conversation. If I was going to watch this unravel, I didn't want her to sense it happening. The next few days were a performance. I smiled more. I touched her arm when I walked past. I asked about her work. And I don't know if she felt guilty or just confused by my change, but she leaned into it. She laughed at my jokes again. She even made dinner one night and put on jazz like we used to before things got so cold. I should have felt hope. Instead, I felt disgust. Bryce didn't message again. He didn't have to. I already knew what they were. But I needed proof. Something undeniable. So, like a pathetic spy in his own home, I waited for Jolene to leave for a late-night grocery run. Then I went back into her phone. I used her Face ID while the screen was still warm. Hidden in her photo vault was a locked folder. I'd never seen her use that before. Inside it, only 5 photos. 4 of them were selfies. Her, at Bryce's party, in the bathroom, in the hallway with a drink. One was taken in front of a painting I didn't recognize. She wore a tight, red velvet dress I didn't remember her owning. Her lips were slightly parted. Eyes glazed in a way I knew too well. The 5th photo stopped my breath. It wasn't dirty, not in a way that would get flagged or go viral. It was worse than that. It was intimate. Her hand on his chest, his hand low on her waist, their foreheads touching, his lips grazing her temple. Not staged, not accidental. A quiet moment of tenderness. A photo you take when you think no one else exists. It was dated the night of the party. And there it was. No denials. No more mental gymnastics. No half-truths or omissions. My wife didn't just cheat. She belonged to someone else, even if just for a night. And I was done waiting for her to tell me. The only question now was, how would I make her feel what I felt? Because the silence wasn't working anymore. The scariest part of betrayal isn't the act itself. It's watching someone live normally beside you afterward, as if nothing ever happened. Jolene kept laughing, kept humming in the kitchen, kept sleeping in our bed like she hadn't silently destroyed everything we built. And I played along like I was too blind to see. But the truth? I was watching her every move like it was a crime scene. The red velvet dress from the photo? She never wore it again. I checked the closet twice. I even searched the laundry and the car. Gone. Maybe it was still at Bryce's place. Maybe it was never meant to come home. Every time she walked by me, every time she reached for her phone and smiled at the screen, I had to dig my nails into my palms to stay composed. I wasn't ready to confront her. Not yet. I wanted to make it hurt the way it hurt me. Quietly, deeply, without a single scream. I started sleeping on the couch. Told her my back was acting up. She didn't push. In fact, she seemed relieved. That was my second confirmation. A woman who has nothing to hide doesn't sleep easier when her husband leaves the bed. But Jolene? She didn't even flinch. I stopped talking much. Just enough to keep things normal on the surface. But my mind was working overtime. I copied the fifth photo from her vault and sent it to a hidden folder on my old work laptop. One she didn't know I still used. I also made a backup of our phone bills and bank statements. I wasn't sure why. Maybe I was preparing for the end. Or maybe I just needed to know everything. Then came the voicemail. It was a Thursday afternoon. I was in the car, waiting for my takeout order, when I saw a notification from an unknown number. One new voicemail. I nearly didn't check it, but curiosity got the better of me. It was Bryce. His voice was smooth, confident, like a man who never learned how to doubt himself. Hey Joe, I know you said to keep things on the low, but I really miss you. Can we talk soon? I don't want to pretend anymore. I'll wait as long as you need. Just, please don't disappear on me. I listened to it 3 times. Each word dug deeper than the last. He missed her. He was willing to wait. What the hell did that mean? Wait for her to leave me? Wait until she could sneak out again? Or had they already talked about something more? I saved the message. Backed it up. My hands were cold as I drove home. That night I cooked her dinner. Steak. Her favorite. Lit candles. Put on the playlist we used on our second anniversary. She looked confused at first, but then she smiled and leaned into it. She thought I was trying again. Thought I was desperate to win her back. She didn't know I was laying the foundation for the final blow. After dinner, she curled up next to me on the couch for the first time in weeks. She even kissed my cheek. Told me she loved me, and I whispered back, I love you too. Not because I meant it, but because I wanted those words to be the last thing she remembered before everything broke. I had a plan now, one she wouldn't see coming, and it started with an invitation I left open on her laptop screen the next morning. One she was never supposed to find. Friday morning, I made sure to leave for work a little earlier than usual. I didn't have any actual meetings. I just needed her to be alone in the house long enough to see what I left behind. It was a Google Calendar invite, carefully placed in a browser window on her laptop, left open just enough to catch her eye. The event title read, Dinner with Jay, 8 p.m. Need to talk. No more secrets. No location. No full name. Just that single, ambiguous message. The real kicker? I scheduled it for that night. 8 p.m. sharp. I didn't text her all day. I didn't answer when she sent a casual, hey, hope your morning's good. Smiley face. I left her to stew in her own imagination. The moment she saw that message, I knew it would eat at her. Who was Jay? Who invited me to dinner? Why the line, no more secrets? Could have been anyone. A woman. A lawyer. A threat. A mirror. I came home at 6 and acted completely normal. I even brought flowers. She was already nervous, I could tell. She'd cleaned the living room. Wore makeup, which she hadn't done on a weekday in months. Her hands trembled slightly when she handed me a glass of wine. Everything okay? She asked, trying to sound casual. I smiled. Yeah. Long day. You? She hesitated. Just boring. Worked on that client brochure. Nothing exciting. We didn't talk about dinner. We didn't talk about the calendar invite. But I saw it in her eyes. The calculations, the flickers of panic, the slow churn of guilt hidden under mascara and fake smiles. I pretended not to notice. At 7:45, I told her I needed to run out for a quick errand. She asked if I wanted company. I told her no, it was just something for work. Her eyes darted toward the kitchen where her phone was charging. I saw it. She knew. As I left, I didn't go far. I parked 2 blocks away and waited. Watched my phone. 10 minutes passed. Then 20. At exactly 8:12 p.m. I received a call from her number. I let it ring once, then declined. A text followed. Where are you? I didn't answer. Another message. Who's Jay? Then, can we talk? I let her wait, just like she made me wait all those nights she came home late, humming, full of secrets. I wanted her to spiral just a little longer. At 8:40, I drove back. When I walked in, she was sitting on the couch, knees tucked under her like a guilty child, her phone clutched in her hand, her eyes wide, searching my face for clues. I didn't give her any. She opened her mouth, then closed it. Did you find something? She finally asked, her voice barely above a whisper. And that's when I did something I'd never done in our marriage. I lied clean and calm. No, but I have a question, I said, walking to the kitchen and opening a drawer. I pulled out a flash drive. Would you be okay watching something with me? She looked confused. What is it? It's just something I found. Her face froze. She didn't know yet. But inside that drive was the voicemail from Bryce. The photos, the screenshots, everything she thought she had hidden, buried, deleted, I had it all. But I wasn't going to throw it in her face. Not yet. I wanted to watch her try to lie through it. I wanted her to choose whether she'd finally tell the truth or double down. Because in the end, it wasn't about catching her anymore. It was about giving her one last chance to save herself, and watching what she'd do with it. She stared at the flash drive like it might burn through her skin. For a few seconds, Jolene didn't speak. She didn't even blink. Her eyes flicked between my face and the tiny object in my hand, and I saw it. The panic, the calculation, the desperate search for a version of reality she could say out loud without it crumbling under its own weight. What's on it? She finally asked, her voice cautious. I shrugged. You tell me. It was a bluff. She didn't know that, of course. For all she knew, that flash drive held everything, the voicemail, the photos, maybe even a video. She didn't realize I hadn't played it yet. I hadn't even plugged it into anything. I just wanted to see what she'd do. She stood up slowly, her movements deliberate, like someone trying not to trigger a trap. Landon. If this is about Bryce, I swear. I raised a hand, cutting her off. I don't want you to swear anything. I want you to talk. Honestly. For once. The silence that followed was thicker than anything we'd shared in years. The kind of silence that swells in your ears until your heartbeat becomes deafening. She opened her mouth again, but no words came out. Her hands fidgeted with the hem of her sleeve. Did you sleep with him? I asked bluntly, not out of cruelty but necessity. I needed it said. I needed to stop imagining and finally hear the truth, or the final lie. She didn't nod. She didn't shake her head. Instead, she let out a shaky breath and whispered, It wasn't like that. Not like that. That's what they always say in movies right before the truth lands like a blade. What was it like, then? I asked. You don't end up in someone's arms, forehead to forehead, whispering promises in a photo you hide in a locked folder, unless it's exactly like that. She stepped back, her voice rising. It was a mistake, Landon. One night, I was drunk. I was stupid. I didn't plan for it to happen. But it did happen. I interrupted, not shouting, just tired. And then it happened again, didn't it? You snuck out. You left our bed to go to him. No, she snapped. Not again. Just that once. I took the flash drive and set it gently on the table between us. This has a voicemail. He misses you. Says he'll wait. Says you told him to keep it low. That doesn't sound like one night. Her face drained of color. She didn't deny it. She just sat down, slowly, like her legs couldn't hold her anymore. I didn't want to hurt you, she said, tears finally gathering in her eyes. You were distant. We were drifting. I didn't know how to fix us, and he was there. You didn't want to hurt me, I echoed, my voice colder now. But you let me kiss you the next morning. You let me make you coffee. You watched me try, and you still kept lying. I thought if I ignored it, it would disappear, she whispered. I looked at her for a long moment, and then I did something I think she didn't expect. I laughed. Not because it was funny, but because it was so pathetic. So absolutely insane to think that she believed the betrayal would just vanish on its own. Then I stood up. Tomorrow morning I want you gone, I said. I don't care where you go. Just not here. She stared at me like I'd slapped her. Wait, Landon, please, can we talk more about this? We can fix it. No, I said, already walking toward the bedroom. You had your chance, and you chose him. I'm just finally choosing me. I didn't slam the door. I didn't cry. I just lay down on our bed, alone, and stared at the ceiling. But I wasn't broken. I was done. The next morning, the house was quiet. Too quiet. The kind of silence that doesn't feel peaceful, it feels staged. I stayed in bed longer than I usually do, listening for movement, for footsteps, for the sound of a suitcase rolling across the floor. Nothing. When I finally stepped into the hallway, the air felt rehearsed. Jolene wasn't in the kitchen, not in the living room. The couch pillows were perfectly arranged, which was odd because she always left them messy. Her car keys were gone, but her toothbrush and charger were still in the bathroom. That told me everything I needed to know. She hadn't left. Not really. She'd run. I got a text around 11 a.m. It was short, just one line. I'll come back later to talk when you've calmed down. Calm down? That made me laugh. She still thought I was some simmering pot of emotion she could manage with timing and tone. But I wasn't boiling anymore, I was frozen. And I think that terrified her more than anything. Around 3 p.m., I heard her car pull into the driveway. I didn't move. I sat in the armchair by the window, watching her walk up with her hands full. Not with bags, but with a photo album. Old. The one her mom made for us as a wedding gift. I hadn't seen it in years. She stepped inside without knocking. Saw me. Paused. Can we talk? She asked softly. I nodded, but didn't offer her a seat. She sat anyway, setting the album between us like a peace offering. I wanted to remind you of who we were before everything got complicated, she said, flipping it open. Before we both stopped trying. We didn't both stop, I said. You did. I begged you to communicate. You chose secrets instead. She didn't argue. Instead, she turned to a photo from our trip to Savannah, our second anniversary. We were laughing, barefoot in the sand, holding ice cream cones. I remember the moment, but I didn't feel it anymore. I need to tell you something else, she said, eyes still on the page. Something I should have told you earlier, but I didn't know how. And that's when she dropped the last brick. Bryce, he didn't just want a fling. He asked me to leave you, to move in with him. He even offered to pay off my student loans if I said yes. I blinked. My throat tightened. And what did you say? She looked at me finally. I said no. I told him I wasn't ready to make that kind of decision yet. Yet, that word. That one damn word. She didn't say, I love my husband. She didn't say, I told him to get lost. She said she wasn't ready, as if it was still on the table, still an option, as if I was still competing. So you were weighing the pros and cons? I asked. Like I was a house you weren't sure you wanted to sell yet? She shook her head. It wasn't like that. I was confused. You were calculating, I snapped. You didn't say no. You said not yet. She didn't cry. I think she knew it wouldn't help anymore. Instead, she just sat there, defeated. I stood up, walked to the door, and held it open. Whatever you were hoping to fix, it's too late, I said. Take the album. Take what's left of your dignity. But leave this house. For the first time since the whole thing began, she didn't argue. She picked up the album, walked out slowly, and didn't look back. The door clicked shut behind her. And for the first time in months, I could breathe. But I wasn't done. She wasn't the only one with a secret left to tell. 3 days passed after Jolene walked out, and every one of them felt like peeling off a heavy, wet layer of grief. The silence in the house didn't sting anymore. It felt earned. For the first time in years, I could hear myself think without second-guessing everything. But the truth is, even with all the pain, there was something oddly liberating about hitting rock bottom. There's nothing left to dig through, just solid ground and a choice to climb. On the fourth day, I took the flash drive, the one with all the evidence, all the pain, and I tossed it into the fire pit in the backyard. I didn't need it anymore. Not for revenge. Not for closure. The confession had already happened, and I was done holding on to proof of betrayal like it was a trophy. The strange part? I didn't hate Jolene. Not anymore. She wasn't a monster. She was someone who got lost. Someone who made choices that slowly tore her away from me until there was nothing left between us but ghosts of better days. But I couldn't carry her mistakes around like weights anymore. I had to let them go. I started therapy. I reconnected with my brother, the one I hadn't spoken to in years because I'd been too consumed with pretending my marriage was perfect. I even took a weekend trip to Denver just to be in a new city with no memories attached. And somewhere between the airport coffee and the unfamiliar skyline, I felt it. Not happiness, but possibility. Then last night I got a message from an old college friend, someone I hadn't talked to since graduation. She saw one of my photos online and said I looked different. Lighter. We talked for hours. Nothing romantic, just real. Honest. And that alone felt like something I hadn't had in a long time. I don't know what's next. I'm not rushing toward it. But I do know this. I'm no longer the man who waited in the dark for someone who already left me emotionally. I'm the man who turned on the light and chose to walk out of the room on his own terms. To anyone out there reading this who's been made to feel invisible in their own relationship, trust me, you're not crazy. And you're not broken. You're just standing at a fork in the road, trying to decide whether to keep losing pieces of yourself or to start picking them up again. I picked mine up, and it feels good to finally feel like me again. Thanks for staying with me through this entire journey. Now it's your turn. What moment in this story made you the angriest? Or maybe the most relieved? Drop it in the comments, and don't forget to like, subscribe, and join the conversation here on Reddit Confessions, where the truth finally speaks.